The sky above the planet Altherian turned red without warning. No one knew where the first shot came from. One moment, people were going about their daily lives, and the next, explosions lit up the horizon like a second sunrise. The air was filled with smoke, panic, and fear. Queen Virela stood on the balcony of her palace, watching her beautiful world fall apart. Her guards rushed her to safety, but her eyes searched the sky for only one thing: her daughter, Princess Alira. The young girl had gone to the outer colonies just 2 days before. There had been no word since the first wave of attacks. The enemy did not look like anything the Altherians had faced before. These were not warriors seeking honor. These were machines and beasts, moving with cold purpose, breaking cities, and burning fields without emotion. Some whispered they were from the far edge of the galaxy, where life turned cruel and logic ruled over mercy. The Queen's forces tried to resist, but Altherian was not ready for a war of this kind. Their defenses were built for tradition, not for survival. The enemy moved too fast. Within hours, communication lines were cut. Whole regions went dark. No messages came through from the colony where Alira had traveled. Queen Virela collapsed to her knees in the war chamber. Advisors surrounded her, speaking of strategy and losses, but she heard only silence in her heart. Her daughter was gone, swallowed by fire and shadow. The royal seal was activated, declaring a planet-wide emergency. But even in all the noise, the Queen's thoughts repeated one quiet truth: my daughter is dead. Far from the palace, in the ruins of the outer colony, a single escape pod opened with a hiss. Inside was a human soldier, his armor damaged and covered in dust. His name was Jace. He had been caught in the chaos while escorting a diplomatic envoy. Now he was alone, surrounded by a broken city and howling winds. He moved carefully through the ruins, weapon drawn and eyes alert. The buildings were twisted, still burning in places. He heard strange creatures move in the shadows, but his focus stayed on a weak signal from his tracker. Someone was alive nearby. Someone who was barely holding on. Jace found the wreckage of a royal skimmer under a fallen wall. Inside he saw her. A girl no older than 20, with blue skin and blood on her forehead. She was breathing, but unconscious. The royal crest glowed faintly on her collar. He didn't know her name, but something told him she mattered. The soldier checked her pulse, wrapped her in a thermal blanket, and lifted her into his arms. She was light, but cold. He looked at the fire surrounding them, then at the smoke rising in the distance. He could not stay here. If he wanted to save her, he had to move now. The wind howled louder as Jay stepped into the ash-covered streets. Every step he took felt heavier. He was not sure if it was the girl's weight or the weight of what he was doing. He had no reason to care, no orders, no backup, but still, he carried her. In the distance, something moved between the burning buildings. Sharp eyes watched him from the shadows. He knew he was being hunted. The enemy wouldn't let any survivors escape. But he couldn't stop now. He had made a choice, and it was too late to turn back. He found an old mining tunnel and slipped inside. The path was narrow and dark, but it kept them hidden. The girl stirred slightly in his arms, whispering a name he didn't understand. Her voice was weak, like a candle trying not to go out in a storm. He held her closer and whispered back, "You're going to be okay." The tunnel led them into the mountain range, where old paths still offered shelter. He made a fire in a cave and treated her wounds. Still, she didn't wake up. He checked her vitals again inside. She needed help soon. Medical supplies, clean water, shelter, he had none of it. Night fell on Altherian. Far above, the Queen still waited, refusing to rest, hoping for a signal, a whisper, anything. All across the planet, stories were ending. Cities were turning into graves. But somewhere in the quiet of a mountain cave, one story was just beginning. Jace sat beside the small fire, his back against the cold stone wall. The cave was quiet except for the wind outside and the soft breathing of the girl in his arms. Her skin was cold to the touch, but her heartbeat was steady. He had survived worse conditions during his training, but never with someone this fragile depending on him. She stirred in her sleep, her fingers twitching slightly. Her face was bruised, and a shallow cut ran across her cheek. He didn't know her name or what she meant to the planet, but he knew royalty when he saw it. The golden emblem on her suit was worn only by Altherion's ruling bloodline. Jace had no communication gear left. His radio had burned out during the crash. The only hope was to reach the ancient signal tower at the southern ridge. It was far, and the mountains between were dangerous, but staying here would mean death for both of them. He checked her vitals again. Her pulse was weaker than before. Time was running out. Wrapping her tightly in his thermal jacket, he stood up and adjusted. His grip, his legs ached, but he didn't care. She needed him to move, and that was enough. Outside, the sky had turned a dull purple. Strange shapes moved across the ridge in the distance. Enemy scouts. Machines with sensors and long, sharp limbs. Jace held his breath and waited. When they vanished into the mist, he began walking south. Each step was a struggle through frozen ground and hidden dangers. The mountain paths were narrow, and the wind could knock a man off with one wrong move. He walked carefully, every muscle tense, his eyes watching for traps and movement. The girl's head rested against his shoulder. She murmured something in her sleep again. A name. Varela. It clicked in his mind. That was the Queen's name. This girl wasn't just a royal. She was the Queen's daughter. The one the whole planet believed to be dead, that made him a target. If the enemy discovered she was alive, they would stop at nothing to finish the job. Jace didn't know why he cared so much. He had no orders, no reward, no reason to risk his life, but something about the way she clung to life made him refuse to let her go. He reached the halfway cave by sunset. An old military hideout built into the rock. He entered carefully, checked for traps, and made sure they were alone. Inside, he laid her down on a blanket and opened a rusted storage locker. Inside were a few energy rations and a broken transmitter. The transmitter sparked but didn't power on. Jace tried to repair it, fingers shaking from cold and exhaustion. After several minutes, the red light blinked once. It wasn't much, but it could send a short-range signal. He programmed an SOS and activated the beacon. The girl coughed weakly. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment. She looked at him with confusion and pain. Her voice was soft, barely louder than a whisper. "Who are you?" He knelt beside her and gave her a small sip of water. "I'm just a human," he said. She blinked again, trying to speak. "Is my mother alive?" Jace didn't know how to answer. He had never met the Queen. He only knew what he'd heard during the last peaceful talks. He nodded slowly, hoping it wasn't a lie. The girl smiled faintly before slipping back into sleep. That night, Jace sat beside her again, holding his rifle and staring at the blinking transmitter. He didn't know if anyone would come. The war had turned this planet into a graveyard. But he refused to leave her behind. His duty wasn't to a flag anymore. It was to the girl. In the royal palace, Queen Varela stared at the wall of names, soldiers and citizens confirmed lost. At the top of the list was her daughter. She refused to sign the final order. Something in her heart told her the girl wasn't gone. Something deeper than reason whispered hope. When the signal from the southern ridge reached the outpost, alarms went off. The transmission was weak but clear. A human distress code, accompanied by a royal medical ping. Commanders rushed to the Queen with the news. Her hands trembled as she listened. "Your Majesty, the signal matches Princess Illyra's life tag." The words dropped into the silence like thunder. The Queen stood slowly, tears in her eyes for the first time in days. "Send a unit," she said. bring her home, and find the one who carried her. Jace woke up to the sound of footsteps echoing in the cave. He grabbed his rifle and moved silently to the entrance. Outside, the sky was still dark, but the air smelled of metal and fire. He saw shadows moving near the path below. They were getting closer. He returned to the girl and checked her pulse. Still weak but steady. Her breathing had improved slightly and her face looked less pale. He didn't have time to celebrate. The enemy scouts were near, and he needed to move before they trapped him. He packed the last of the rations, wrapped her in the thermal blanket again, and lifted her into his arms. His legs ached from the long journey, but he didn't stop. The signal had been sent. He just had to survive long enough for someone to answer it. The narrow path ahead was covered in snow and broken stones. Every few minutes he stopped to listen. The enemy was smart. They didn't always make noise. He knew how easily he could be caught. He also knew what would happen if they found her. The wind picked up, making it harder to see. Jace moved between rocks and old mining carts, following a route he had studied years ago. His memory of this planet was foggy, but instinct helped him where maps could not. He kept going, step by step. The girl opened her eyes for a moment. "Where are we?" she asked weakly. Jace didn't stop walking. "Somewhere safe," he said. Her eyes closed again. She trusted him. That trust felt heavier than the weapon on his back or the gear on his waist. Behind them, a small drone hovered silently, scanning the terrain. Jace didn't see it, but he sensed something was wrong. He ducked under a fallen bridge and hid behind a pillar. The drone passed without noticing, but it wouldn't be long before more followed. He waited 5 minutes, then continued west toward the high ridge. At the top was a burned-out lookout tower. It wasn't safe, but it was the highest point for miles. If the rescue team was coming, they'd look for him there. It was his only chance. At the palace, Queen Virella stood beside the tracking table. Her generals argued about risk and security, but she ignored them. Her eyes stayed on the blinking dot on the map. Her daughter was alive. That was all that mattered. The rescue team had already launched. Back on the ridge, Jace reached the base of the old tower. It was partially collapsed, with twisted metal and burned stairs. He laid the girl down gently and climbed halfway up to plant a flare. A bright red light exploded into the sky. Then he waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. The girl groaned, waking. Slowly, she looked at him with tired eyes. "You're not from here," she said. Jace nodded. "No, I'm just a soldier who got stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time." She smiled weakly at his words. She tried to sit up but winced in pain. Jace gently pushed her back down. "You need to rest." "Help is coming," he said. She reached out and held his hand. "Thank you for not leaving me," she whispered. He didn't answer. He just gave her a quiet nod. Suddenly, the sound of engines filled the sky. He looked up and saw 2 royal dropships descending fast. Blue banners marked them as Queen's Guard units. Jace stood and waved both arms. The soldiers landed quickly, surrounding the ridge with rifles raised. The commanding officer stepped forward and saw the girl lying on the ground. His eyes widened. "Princess Alira?" he asked. She gave a weak nod. The officer saluted and turned to Jace. "You saved her," he said in disbelief. Jace just shrugged. Medics rushed in to stabilize Alira. They gave her oxygen and fluids, wrapping her in heated layers. As they lifted her into the ship, she looked back at Jace. "Don't leave," she said softly. The soldiers looked at each other, unsure what to do. The officer nodded at Jace. "You're coming with us. The Queen will want to see you." Jace hesitated, then stepped onto the ship. For the first time since the war began, he felt the weight of his mission shifting. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. The ship rose into the sky, leaving the broken ridge behind. Below them, The enemy forces searched empty trails, unaware that their prize had just flown beyond their reach. And in the heart of the storm, something unspoken had already begun. The dropship flew fast over the war-torn mountains, cutting through thick smoke and cold winds. Jace sat quietly near the back, his rifle resting across his knees. Beside him, medics worked quickly to keep Princess Illyra stable. Her breathing was steady, but her condition was still fragile. She looked at him with tired eyes, trying to stay awake. He gave her a small nod, not sure what to say. He had fought many battles, but none like this. Saving a princess was never in his training, yet here he was, heading straight to the heart of an alien kingdom. The soldiers around him didn't speak. They watched him with curiosity and quiet suspicion. To them, he was an outsider, a human with no rank, no orders, and no known purpose. But none of them questioned his right to be there. He had carried their princess through fire. As the ship crossed into the capital's airspace, alarms sounded across the palace. Troops lined the landing pad. Queen Virela stood at the edge, wearing her royal armor. Her face was strong, but her hands trembled behind her back. She had waited for this moment since the war began. When the ramp opened, the medic stepped out first, carrying Illyra on a hover stretcher. The queen gasped and ran forward. For a moment, royal guards reached for their weapons, unsure of her movement. But then they saw her tears, and no one dared to stop her. Virela knelt beside her daughter and held her hand. "Illyra," she whispered. The girl blinked and smiled weakly. "Mother." That one word broke the queen's calm. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead gently to her daughter's. No more words were needed. Behind them, Jace stepped off the ship slowly. The guards blocked his path until the queen raised her hand. "Let him pass," she said. The crowd watched in silence as the unknown human walked toward the royal family. His steps were steady, but his heart beat fast. He stopped a few feet away and saluted. "Ma'am," he said simply. Queen Virela studied him carefully. She had seen soldiers from many worlds, but none had crossed enemy lines to bring her daughter back alive. There was something in his eyes that spoke more than any words. "You saved her," she said. Jace nodded. "I found her in the ruins. She was hurt. I couldn't leave her." The queen looked down at her daughter, then back at him. "You risked your life for someone you didn't know." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She stepped closer and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You are no longer just a soldier. You are a hero to my people." He looked down, unsure how to respond. Titles never mattered to him. But in this moment, he felt something shift deep inside. Illyra was taken to the royal medical chamber. Jace was escorted to a private room within the palace. It was simple but safe. He sat on the edge of the bed, removing his gear for the first time in days. His body ached, but his mind was still racing. Across the hall, Queen Virela met with her High Council. Generals argued about the enemy's next move, and ministers whispered about the human. The queen listened, then raised her hand. "He is under my protection," she said. "Anyone who questions it will answer to me." Jace was given clean clothes and food. He didn't eat much. His thoughts stayed with Illyra. He wondered if she would be okay. He wondered why he felt responsible for her. Maybe it was because she had looked at him not with fear, but with trust. Later that night, a soft knock came at his door. He opened it to find Illyra standing there, wrapped in a warm robe. Her face was pale, but she was walking on her own. "I couldn't sleep," she said. He stepped aside, letting her in without a word. They sat by the window, looking out at the stars above the palace. "You didn't have to save me," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know." She smiled. "But you did." He looked at her, his voice steady. "I would do it again." Neither of them spoke for a long time. The stars outside blinked gently in the sky. Far away, the war still raged. But for now, in this quiet room above a city of fire and grief, peace had found them. For a moment. The morning sun rose over the capital, casting golden light across the palace towers. Altharian's people had heard the news. Their lost princess was alive, and she had returned with a human by her side. Joy spread through the streets, mixed with questions and whispers. Inside the palace, Queen Virela stood before the War Council. Her voice was calm but firm. The enemy will not stop. They know my daughter survived. They will strike again. We must prepare. The room fell silent as her words sank in. General Keller, the Queen's most trusted advisor, stepped forward. We should move the princes to the inner vault. It's the safest place in the city. But the Queen shook her head. She will not be hidden again. She will live, not hide. That is my decision. In her private chamber, Alira rested by the window. The soft wind carried the scent of morning flowers. She looked stronger than before, though still pale. When Jace entered, she smiled and motioned for him to sit. I feel like I've slept for weeks, she said. He sat beside her, his back straight as always. You've been through worse than sleep. You fought death itself. She laughed softly, then looked at him with serious eyes. You carried me through fire. That's not something people forget. Before he could answer, a knock came at the door. A royal guard entered and bowed. The Queen requests your presence, both of you. Alira stood slowly, leaning on Jace for support. They walked side by side through the grand halls toward the throne room. The Queen waited for them, standing alone beneath the high dome. When they arrived, she looked at them both for a long moment. Alira, my daughter, you are strong, you are alive. And you are not alone. Her voice echoed through the marble chamber. She turned to Jace. And you, human, you risked your life for our bloodline. Tell me what you want. Name your reward. Jace shifted uncomfortably. I want nothing, he said. I didn't do it for reward. The Queen raised an eyebrow. Then why did you do it? Jace paused before answering. Because I could. Because it was right. Because no one else was going to. His voice was steady. The Queen stared at him, then gave a slow nod. Then your place is here, not just as a guest, but as a protector. Gasps filled the room. The High Council looked confused. Some looked angry, but no one spoke. The Queen's word was final. Alira touched Jace's arm. Only if you want. Tio, she said. Jace nodded without hesitation. I'll stay. Training began the next day. Jace was given access to the palace guard systems. He learned Altharian technology quickly, adapting human tactics to their style. In return, he taught their soldiers how to fight without fear, how to protect without hesitation. Alira watched his progress with quiet admiration. She had returned from the edge of death, but her mind still wandered to the mountains, to the silence, to the man who never gave up. He became more than a rescuer. He became her anchor in a world that had changed. That night, they walked in the garden under glowing lanterns. Why did you really stay? She asked. Jace looked at her, choosing his words carefully. Because I feel like I was meant to be here, not by accident. By something else. Something bigger. She didn't laugh. She didn't tease him. She simply nodded. I feel the same. Their hands brushed, then held. No guards interrupted. No advisors watched. Just two souls trying to find peace after fire. Far above the city, enemy ships gathered in the shadow of the outer moons. Their leader stared at the blue planet below, his voice cold and sharp. She lives. And now she's guarded by a human. Unacceptable. Prepare the next strike. Back on Altharian, the Queen stood at her window, eyes scanning the stars. She felt the weight of what was coming. War was not finished. But her daughter had returned. And a human stood beside her. That was more hope than she had known in years. Asterisk alarms blared across the royal city just before dawn. People ran to shelters. Guards took their positions. From the tallest towers to the deepest tunnels, Altherian prepared for another wave of destruction. Queen Virila stood in the war chamber surrounded by her generals. The enemy fleet had entered the atmosphere without warning. Unlike the first attack, this time they came for one target, the royal palace. Alira watched the skies from her balcony. Fire trails streaked through the clouds. Her hands clenched tightly at her sides. "They're here for me," she whispered. Jay stepped behind her, calm but alert. "Then we make sure they fail." The palace shook as the first blasts hit. The outer walls, defense shields flickered under pressure. Jace rushed with the Queen's elite guards to reinforce the east side. Alira followed closely, refusing to hide this time. Explosions echoed through the marble halls. Smoke rolled across the floor. Jace fought side by side with Altherian warriors, his rifle firing in short, perfect bursts. His training showed in every move. His focus never left Alira. The enemy soldiers were not like before. They were faster, armored, and guided by something darker. These were not machines with cold purpose. These were hunters sent to erase a bloodline. Alira used a pulse blade, her form graceful and deadly. She had been trained since childhood, but war had changed her. She moved like someone who had already faced death and refused to meet it. Again, Jace and Alira moved together through the ruined halls, covering each other without words. They reached the central gate just as it was about to fall. Behind it, the Queen stood with her final line of defenders. Jace took position beside her. "We hold them here," he said. The Queen looked at him with fire in her eyes. "This palace has stood for 5,000 years. It will not fall today." The gate burst open. A flood of enemies charged in. The air filled with noise and fire. Jace and the Queen fought back to back, while Alira led the flank. Her voice rose above the chaos, giving orders and hope. For hours, the battle raged. Room by room, they pushed the enemy back. The price was high. Many brave fighters fell. But the heart of the palace refused to break. Near the command deck, Jace faced the enemy leader, a towering figure in obsidian armor, eyes glowing red. They clashed in brutal silence, blade against blade, will against will. The enemy leader struck hard, knocking Jace to the ground. Blood poured from his side. He tried to stand, but his legs failed. The dark figure raised its weapon for the final blow. Then came a flash of light. Alira leaped between them, her blade slicing through the enemy's arm. The creature screamed and staggered back. "You will not touch him," she said. Together, they fought the enemy leader, blow after blow, until the armor cracked. The final strike came from Alira, piercing the creature's chest. It fell without a word. With their leader gone, the remaining forces broke and fled. Royal guards chased them from the city, and silence returned to the palace. Smoke rose from broken walls, but the banner still stood. Jace lay on the floor, his vision fading. Alira knelt beside him, tears on her cheeks. "Stay with me," she said. He smiled weakly, blood on his lips. "I'm not going anywhere." The medics rushed in, lifting him onto a stretcher. The Queen followed close behind, her armor scratched and dented. She looked down at the human who had defended her throne and saved her daughter once again. "You are not just a soldier," she said. "You are part of this world now." Jace woke up to the soft sound of running water and the scent of healing herbs. His body ached, wrapped in thick bandages, and machines hummed beside his bed. The royal medical chamber was quiet, the war outside replaced with peace for now. Alira sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his. Her eyes were tired, but full of warmth. She had refused to leave his side since the battle ended. She leaned forward slightly when his eyes opened, whispering his name like a prayer. He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his chest. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't push yourself. You lost a lot of blood." He gave her a weak smile. "Still alive, though." Her smile returned, soft and full of relief. Queen Varela entered the chamber moments later, her steps firm and proud. Behind her walked members of the High Council and the Palace Guard. She approached the bed slowly, then stood tall beside her daughter and the man who had saved them both. "The war is not finished," she said, "but today we did not fall. We stood our ground because of you." Jace shifted in the bed, unsure how to respond. The queen extended her hand toward him. "You deserve more than thanks. You deserve a future." She turned to the council. "Let it be known. This human shall be named Guardian of the Crown, not just for what he did, but for what he represents." A mix of shock and admiration spread across the chamber. No human had ever been given such honor. Jace looked at Alira, then at the queen. "I'm not from here. I'm just a soldier who made a choice." The queen nodded. "And that choice changed the fate of our people." Her voice echoed with pride and certainty. The next day, the city held a ceremony in the central square. Crowds gathered from every region of Altherion. Bright banners waved in the wind. Children sat on rooftops. Survivors stood arm in arm, watching history being made. Alira wore a ceremonial robe, her injuries hidden beneath flowing fabric. She walked beside Jace, whose arm was still in a sling, but whose eyes were sharp and alert. The crowd parted as they approached the crystal platform at the center. Queen Varela raised her hands to silence the cheers. "This is a day of honor, and a day of unity. We do not forget the pain of war, but we also do not ignore the light that rose from it." She gestured toward Jace. That light came from him. The crowd erupted in applause as Jace stepped forward. He said nothing at first, unsure if words could match the moment. Then he looked out at the people, at their faces filled with hope, and found his voice. "I didn't come here to be a hero," he said. "I didn't come here at all. I crashed, I survived, and I found someone who needed help. That's all. I did." He paused, then raised his hand. "But I saw something in this world worth protecting." Silence fell again as the queen stepped beside him. She lifted a silver medallion and placed it around his neck. "You are Altherion now. Not by blood, by choice. And in this world, that is the highest honor we have." Later that evening, Jace and Alira sat in the garden again, just as they had days before. The sky was quiet. The stars blinked softly above them. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he rested his hand over hers without saying a word. "You could leave," she whispered. "Go back to your world. Go back to your kind." Jace looked at her and shook his head. "I already found my place. And it's here, with you." Their silence said more than words. For the first time since the war began, both of them felt truly at peace. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Asterisk. The days that followed were filled with rebuilding. The palace walls were restored stone by stone. Streets once covered in ash were swept clean, and the people began to smile again. Altherion was healing, not because the danger had ended, but because they now believed it could be overcome. Jace remained close to Alira, not as a bodyguard, but as something more. They trained together in the mornings and walked the gardens at night. He had stopped feeling like a visitor. This world had accepted him, and he had accepted it in return. Queen Varela watched them from afar. She saw the way her daughter laughed again, how her eyes no longer carried only sorrow. Alira had been broken by war, but Jace had carried her through it, and in doing so, had become a part of her spirit. Though the capital had found peace, the outer regions were still in chaos. Small enemy factions remained, scattered and dangerous. Jace joined Altherion patrols, leading missions to push back the last of the invaders. Every time he returned, Alira was waiting. One evening the queen called a private meeting in the highest chamber of the palace. Only Alira and Jace were present. The stars shimmered through the crystal ceiling above them, and silence filled the room before the queen spoke. "The war changed everything," she said. "It showed us who we are and who we can become. And it showed me that blood does not decide loyalty, action does." She turned toward Jace and placed a small crystal orb in his hand. "This is the seal of the ancient guardians," she continued. "Only given to those who protect not for duty, but for love." Jace looked at the orb, then at the queen. He said nothing, but bowed his head deeply, honoring the weight of what she had given him. Alira stepped forward and placed her hand on his. "There's something else," she said. "Not as a princess, just as me." Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with something more powerful. "Will you stay with me, not just in war, but in everything?" Jace looked into her eyes, and the weight of the moment disappeared. "I already have," he said. "From the moment I picked you up in that burning city, I chose you. Every day. After that has only made me more sure." The queen smiled gently and turned away, giving them a moment alone. Alira stepped closer, and they embraced not with passion, but with understanding. They had survived the worst, and what they had built between them could not be shaken. In the weeks that followed, a great celebration was held, not for victory, but for rebirth. All regions of Altherion sent representatives. Lights danced in the sky, and stories were told of the human who walked through fire and carried royalty in his arms. Jace and Alira stood together before the crowd. Not as warrior and princess, not as outsider and noble, but as equals. Their hands joined, they spoke of unity, courage, and the strength of choice. The people listened, and they believed. Years passed, and the story of that war became legend. But what remained more powerful than the war itself was the bond that had formed in the heart of destruction. It was told in every village, every school, and every starship that left the planet. They thought the princess had died, but a human carried her home. And together they saved the world. And somewhere beyond the city walls, under the same stars that once watched their struggle, Jace and Alira walked again, no longer haunted by the past, but building a future only they could have imagined.